What's up, my know-it-alls? It's time for something exciting. We had to get here early because I tell you what, I was on vacation this weekend, and what happened? They dropped the episode, which I should have expected because San Diego Comic-Con is exactly the kind of place where you drop this sort of thing. But it's the crossover episode. Oh my God, I can't believe it. So we're gonna go ahead and do the review because frankly, the recap part is the part that sometimes Mrs. Know-It-All and Baby Know-It-All are like, look, can we just kind of jump in after that and just talk about the thing? So I'm gonna get the both of them on for another video, which will drop later this week. Most likely, I'll most likely drop it tomorrow on what we're gonna call it Trek Talk Tuesdays, which is a show I used to do. And so it's a lot of fun, man. I'm excited for it. Those are the ladies over there, but they're gonna join me for the next video. Do me a favor, like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps the channel grow organically and lets everybody know you want to be part of the Know-It-All Nation, and that's super exciting. So, okay, without further ado, let's get into it. Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Episode 7, Those Old Scientists. Man, I tell you what, there is probably no more anticipated show that I have really been looking forward to, genuinely excited about seeing, than this one. They dropped hints of it last year that it was going to be coming, and I'm thrilled to death to see what the end result was, and it was amazing. I've seen it twice now. I saw it the first time on my phone, and then we watched it again when we got back last night. And immediately got in here and I wanted to start trying to talk through this whole thing because it is a really good episode. So let's jump right into it. The episode starts, funny enough, in the animated space, in lower deck space. And what we get to see is a mission where the Cerritos is having to touch back and they're checking in on an ancient artifact that was found about 100 years before and discovered by Pike on the Enterprise. Or was it? Tendi has some thoughts. She says, well, wait a minute, the Orions are the ones who discovered this thing a long time ago. My grandmother was on a ship that discovered it. And Boimler's like, are we serious? Come on, okay. How many, did they really have science vessels? And she's like, yeah, who else do you think built the starships? Not a bad question, and one that I'm actually here for. So great approach there, Tendi. Of course, everybody goes down, and as they're exploring and investigating, they want to take some pictures in very lower deck style. And so, great callback, by the way, to, if those of you remember Voyager, there was a camera that was used in an episode. It's the exact same framing. So again, those guys at lower decks doing wonderful work in terms of keeping canon alive. So what happens? They take a picture, it activates, something happens, probably some of the radioactive isotopes activate the entire, this artifact, and it's actually some sort of a portal shows up. Boimler gets sucked in, Mariner tries to jump after him, and unfortunately, it closes before she can. So there's this big moment. Oh no, what are we gonna do? Where's Boimler? We come to Strange New Worlds. And in the real world, I say real because we go from animated, now we go to shift over into real. You see Boimler, played by the ever so talented Jack Quaid, come flying out of the time portal. And he's kind of dizzy, and sure enough, there's Una, I believe it's Una, Spock, and La'an who are standing there, and he's like, oh, you guys look so real, and he faints. And that's when Una activates her communicator and is like, Captain, we may have a problem. Go to the opening. The opening is all animated. I was stupid thrilled by this. It's just fun, man. It's so much fun seeing them explore what they can do with it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it to no end. And you get to see the entire intro done. And there's this really awesome part where as the ship is coming out of one of the little nebulas, decorative nebula things, it's got the little space squid, the alien squid attached to it, just like on the lower decks. And again, this is one of those episodes that's really going to stay with me for a while. I'm not like a lot of other folks who sit here and say, oh, well, it's got to be right up there with Trials and Tribulations and blah, 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 this and that. It's not up there for me because it's goofy. It's up there for me just because it's so iconic. And it's such a referential and reverential episode. By that I mean, it really does lay a lot of groundwork, and they do a really good job with it. So I'm not gonna get too far ahead of myself. Let me get back. So then we wake up with Boimler in sickbay, and it's very much, you saw the clip from last week where he wakes up to see Pike standing over him, and sure enough, He's trying to play it off. Oh my gosh, there's this awesome moment right before he wakes up where they're like, yes, Mr. Spock had a chance to look at this Delta. It's also a communicator. And she pushes the little button. And Una goes, what are you talking about? Flipping it open is the best part. Or it was right. I think it was Pike. It was like, flipping it open is the best part. She's like, yeah, no, totally. I think ours is better too. And it's just, I loved it. So they took the opportunity to have a meta commentary about different Star Treks and whatnot, and I enjoyed that. I thought that was really, it was touching, and I thought it did a really good job. So then you come to the part where Boimler wakes up and he's all excited, and they're like, okay, you can't really say much, this and that, and him and La'an are walking down a corridor, and she sort of implies that she has also time traveled, and they're reviewing the rules and laws and whatnot. Because Boimler establishes later on that if he's not careful, that he's going to end up having to stick around there, living off the grid somewhere nice and carefully. So that's when you get the first time the Orions show up. And so, because they had gone back down to the planet to try to investigate and see what they could find, and they find that there's a specific kind of metal that is that made the portal turn active. And so Spock's like, oh, it must have come out of here, a little control panel, the whole bit. All of a sudden the Orions show up, they transport them back up, everyone comes up to the bridge, and Boimler can't help himself. He Boimlers himself all over the bridge, and he's like, because he tries to explain to them, the whole time Pike's like, I don't know what's happening. Pike, I feel, is playing the part. He's the straight man in this whole situation. He's playing the part of the long-suffering, like, what is happening? Why am I going through this right now? Person. And I love that. I love that for him. I think Anson Mount's uniquely equipped for that role, and he does a wonderful job with it. So he's telling him the whole time, he's like, you should be quiet, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And then and he tries to explain to him, look, trust me, I can't tell you why I know that that's a science vessel. And Pike's like, okay, or how many do Orions have science vessels? And he's like, yes, and I come from a time where it's a little offensive to imply that all Orions are pirates. And I'm like, look, man, call us spade a spade. But Pike takes the opportunity. He's like, hey, we're just gonna, we just need we'll figure this whole thing out, and it's gonna be okay. And then the Orions steal the artifact. Pike is not happy in the least, and they're even talking a little bit. Oh, earlier there's a moment where Boimler sees Una, and he's like, jumps away from her, and he's super like, oh my god, and she takes it to mean that he must know something about her future and her fate. Something bad must happen, whatever, he doesn't want to talk to her about it. That's the implication that's given. And completely, by the way, of her own volition, that's the implication she gives. And so, that's her right there. Anyway. And so what happens is they end up, they're like, look, I can track the Orions. And he's like, how in the world can you track the Orions? And he goes, look, I know how to do it. I can make the adjustments. Maybe you just don't look. And she's like, we can't do that. He's like, can we? And sure enough, the next they cut to everyone facing the other direction. And he's just like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And when he finishes, they track down the Orions and they go talk to them. They decide to, and this is a really cool name drop here, they decide to trade triticale grain that has been specifically made for this one colony that is having issues growing stuff, and it was going to be able to grow in their particular temperate area. They trade for the thing. They put the artifact back. So while all this is happening, there is a brief moment where Boimler is he's in the lounge, and Ortegas and Chapel show up and start kind of not really harassing him, but they're talking to him about the situation, and they're like, hey, what are we going to do? What you should stay for movie night, this and that, blah, blah, blah. Spock has now encountered Boimler several times, and every time he encounters him, he's doing this weird smiling thing or trying to laugh about stuff. It's very off-putting, to the point that when Boimler sees him smile at Chapel, it's this really disconcerting and very disturbing smile. And that's when Chapel he talks to Chapel a little bit, and she explains, and he's like, look, my Spock is very serious, and I need him to do the things he's supposed to do, and I don't know what's going on. Feeding into the idea that not everything you see this is not how everything's supposed to be, or at least how it's supposed to play out, and it won't ultimately play out that way. I think this feeds exactly into people's concerns about canon. They need to not have them. By that I mean, this is a fad, this is a phase, this is a thing that's going to go through, because as we know in TOS, eventually they are not together. So I think they're going to come to a place either by the end of the season, but by the end of this run, meaning by the end of what Strange New Worlds and whatever's going on with Chapel and them, they're going to find out that they work better as friends. It'll probably be a big emotional breakup or whatever, and they'll stay colleagues, respecting one another. And meanwhile, she'll keep this unrequited love for him. And so, but that's what this moment is. So then you have, that's when they get called to go down to the planet in order to go ahead and try this thing again. So they go down. There's enough charge in the ore, the little power thing, for one more jump. They activate the thing, and that's when, as he's about to go in, Mariner comes flying out. She comes flying out, and she's immediately like, "Oh my goodness!" And she is so Mariner. So one of the things that people considered to be distracting was that these characters were like, well, why in the world are these characters going to act like cartoons, this and that? They're not acting like cartoons. You're thinking that because they come from a cartoon. They're acting like they're characters. The characters, regardless of the place, act and behave a certain way, and I loved that. I think that them having their own personalities worked great. Also, I had a friend of mine, one of my colleagues on the Discord was like, hey, but how is there's a time, a Starfleet, they keep chronological order of events, but they have very specific rules, and basically this episode breaks all those rules. Now Mariner's aboard, and what are they going to do? So they talk, and they're meeting, and they're like, look, we need to figure this whole thing out, and then Mariner somewhat puts her foot in her mouth and basically volunteers to help Uhura translate the glyphs on the artifact, while Boimler is given to Spock to help him, because Boimler took a semester of synthesis, whatever the heck, and artificial synthesis or something or other. And it's just interesting to see kind of how the interplay works. So finally, Spock and Boimler are working on the thing. Uhura and Mariner are working, and Mariner is talking to Uhura and telling her how she's geeking out. Everybody's geeking out over everybody. And Uhura is basically like, well, I don't understand, I haven't done anything yet to be this and that. And Mariner's like, look, we got to relax. And she pulls not pulls rank because they're both ensigns, but she basically says, look, Starfleet code such and such says that we're supposed to take breaks in order to maintain work, whatever. And so they go and take a break. And while they're on their break, they're with Ortegas, and she makes them this Orion drink. They don't have the actual Orion liqueur that goes in it, but at the end of the day, she makes her best variation of it. And sure enough, while they're talking, all this stuff comes out. You find out the glyphs are Nausicaan, because Ortegas knows some things, and Mariner knows some things, and ultimately it helps. And so now we jump to Spock and Boimler, who are working on synthesizing this ore that's needed. And it's really, as they're working on it, Spock is talking to him, is like, hey, so something came out that you clearly said something about the future and this and that and what's going on. And Spock is not stupid. He deduces that Boimler is reacting the way he's reacting and said the things he said because of how Spock's behaving. Spock's like, so my exploration of human emotions and whatnot is, I'm not going to stop it because that's the path I would have chosen anyway. And to stop it because of what you said feels like that would be changing things. It's a logical and reasoned approach, and I get it. And I think he's right, especially because a little later on, Spock points out that it is exhausting behaving this way. And I'll bring that up in a second. So they end up destroying the little lab. It doesn't work. It explodes, and they can't synthesize the thing. And that's when they come to the conclusion, Boimler does, because he's talking with Pelia. And Pelia's being her normal Pelia-like self. And Boimler's like, look, I feel like we need to be able to, how do we solve or fix this? How are we better? How do we make this thing work better in a way that is not gonna break time? And finally she's like, look, just figure out how to fix the thing. And he's like, so they had to give up Triticale, the grain. So he wants to break into a shuttle, which he does. Mariner's there because she anticipated him doing something stupid, which is cartoon logic all day, and I'm fine with that. And so what happens is she tries to help him break the rules, only to have La'an catch them. And so they go to Pike, and Pike's upset, and early throughout this whole thing, you find out Pike's birthday is a holiday. And he's like, "Oh, you guys gonna throwing Pike a party or something?" And the whole bit. So Pike, while he's dressing them down about, he's like, "I'm gonna take you to Starbase One, and you're gonna be their issue. I can't keep worrying about what you got going on." And he tries to explain on a personal note, "Please stop encouraging my crew to throw me a party." And he tries to explain, "Well, what if there's a time when you aren't able to enjoy a party?" And clearly they're talking about what we know is going to happen to Pike in the future, the accident, the whole 9 yards, the whole thing, the wheelchair, all that. And Pike is like, "Look, I get it." He's like, "Nothing, my desire not to have a party has nothing to do with that and everything to do with the past. Come to find out, him and his father never had a good relationship, and ultimately he wants to go and spend some quiet time having a conversation with his father who's dead. It's the first year he'll be alive longer, he'll be a year older than his father was when he died." So that's, and at that point, man, I tell you what, Boimler says something really incredible. He goes, "Okay, I get it, but what if as much as you wish you could have one more conversation with your dad, what if the people who care about you, they're going to one day wish that they had had one more conversation with you?" And it really puts some things in perspective for Pike in a way that I like. The future was it was good. I like what they did. And so what they come to is they figure out, so they're having a big meet about this whole thing, and he figures out the solution is that all starships, before you build the next one, if it bears the same name, a piece of the last one is put into the ship. There's a piece of the NX-01 Enterprise, which was built using that mineral that the time portal needs. So they find it in engineering. It's really cool. And you get to see this really great moment where the crew of the Enterprise is geeking out over the NX-01 people. They're you totally see them geeking out. Ortegas is geeking out about the pilot from the old ship, and Uhura is geeking out about Hoshi Sato and the communication stuff. It's, as someone who, I was not a big fan of Enterprise. I did not like the show. I had major problems with it at the time. I watched it because I'm a Star Trek fan. I watched Star Trek. But there were things I didn't like about it. This helped me marry and go, okay, if I see this as heroes who helped inspire heroes, I get it. I'm willing to go there, and I kind of, as a result, want to rewatch Enterprise, to be honest, which sounds like the silliest thing ever, but the truth is, yeah, they've made me really want to rewatch Enterprise and get an appreciation for it, especially with knowing that the Strange New Worlds crew knew and understand. And it's so funny, but this is the part where they're like, Uhura's like, "Oh my gosh, are we sounding like them?" Referencing Mariner and Boimler, and that's when Spock's like, "Yes," and it's exhausting. I feel like in that moment, we're seeing the beginning of Spock just realizing that this approach to emotional connection, human whatever, insight, it's not for him. It's not for him. And I think this is even though it's in this comedic centric episode, I believe firmly that's going to be the case. It's going to end up being not for him, so to speak. Anyway, before they transport down, that's when Spock's like, "Live long and prosper, Mr. Boimler." And even Mariner's like, "Oh," and even you can tell because Pike clearly knows it's special. Pike's like, "Yeah, that's awesome." It was good. It was such a great moment. I was thrilled. Again, this whole episode was fun. It was memorabilia full. It was us. I feel like this was us if we'd ever been in the position to meet the characters in real life. I really do. And I really do. I enjoyed what they're doing. So then they get down to the planet. They're going to use this device to get back, and the Orions are there. And that's when, essentially, Boimler explains, listen, these people from the future. We got to travel back to the future. And he says, "Listen, one of our close friends is." Her name is such and such Tendi, or she's also known as the daughter of the blah, blah, blah. And it's the title they have in Orion. And he's like, "Well, do you know that name? I have a crew member who goes by that name." He's like, "Yeah, that's her great-grandmother. And listen, if you guys let this whole thing go down, we will let everybody know it was discovered by Orion scientists." And the dude's like, "That's all I ever wanted, man." And I love that. I love that. And because one, it proves Tendi was right. And also it adds depth to the Orions that I feel like we don't often get. And don't get me wrong, Discovery showed us a lot of that aspect, the who they were militaristically and all that other stuff. But it's good, it's exciting. So the next thing that I think, so then they activate the thing and they go and they go back, and then we switch back to animated world. And in the Lower Decks universe, they arrive back there. You find out that Mariner was the one who really fought hard for that mission because she knew Boimler would want to go on it. It's really sweet. Again, showing that team being as unified as they can be. Then we cut to black, and then we come back on the animated Enterprise. And you get to see the crew. They're enjoying, because the Orion guys gave them the Orion liqueur that's needed for the drink. And they're talking. And at one point, they're all like, what's going on with my eyes? Why does everything feel so two-dimensional? And it's apparently this drink is having this effect. It's great. It was really good. So there you go. Now you know. And if knowing's half the battle, you're halfway to being a know-it-all yourself. So what's the know-it-all index for this episode? Come on, you had to know it was coming. This episode, 10 out of 10. Let's go. 10 out of 10. Loved it. Loved everything about it. You're going to love it. If you don't love it, I don't know what weird curmudgeon world you're living in. We'll talk a little bit more about what some people are saying online during the Trek Talk Tuesday episode with the fam, as I have Mrs. Know-It-All and Baby Know-It-All who are going to be on the show, and we're going to discuss in great detail everything having to do with this episode and what the crossover meant, specifically because Mrs. Know-It-All has been with me in the past for Strange New Worlds, but also because Baby Know-It-All reviewed with me Lower Decks. So hopefully you'll stick around and be looking for that. Subscribe to the channel. I love you guys. We'll talk soon. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.